Reaction tonight from survivors of clergy sex abuse. They're talking about the $85 million settlement announced today with the Archdiocese of Boston.
What will the settlement mean for victims, the church, and ordinary Catholics? We'll ask our next guests. Attorney Phil Moran is legal counsel for the Catholic Alliance. And Barrett Doyle is with the Coalition of Catholics and Survivors. And Phil Saviano is the founder of SNAP. That's the Survivors Network for those abused by priests. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Phil, fair settlement?
I think it's fair, yes, and something that I just heard from Jeff Newman makes it particularly fair to me, and that is the fact that the mediator can look at each of these cases individually and can refuse to settle with someone that he doesn't think is a legitimate victim.
Even though Jeff inferred that that would be an extraordinary circumstance.
Well, I'm sure it is extraordinary. I think most of the victims are truly victims, but there is that chance. In fact, I know of at least one individual priest who absolutely did not do what he's accused of doing, and he wants his day in court, and this obviously will give him an opportunity to fight this. And
you expect some disappointment with the terms of the settlement, particularly the $85 million.
I don't think it's a generous settlement. I think what you have to do is look at the per victim compensation of this after the lawyer's fees. It's very small, really, compared to other settlements in the church crisis throughout the country. So I think Bishop O'Malley could have done a lot better. And interestingly enough, the Porter case, which he settled too, in Fall River, was the absolute smallest per victim compensation settlement in the history of this crisis. So we see here not Archbishop O'Malley being a healer, in my opinion, but him being a very shrewd negotiator.
But Jeff Newman said, the attorney whom we had on the previous segment, that on balance it works out to about the same as the Gagin settlement when you factor in that the church is going to pay for any counseling that and for the victims if they so desire.
The Gagin settlement was deplorable, though.
Phil, you know a lot of the victims in this case. What are the two sides? What do they have to weigh before they decide if they sign on the bottom line before the 37-day limit is up?
Well, the hardest thing they have to decide is how to put a price on the loss of a child's innocence. How to put a price on 20 or 30 years of emotional torment and shame and embarrassment. How to put a price on an organization that knew that kids were being raped and never did anything to protect them.
Are they saying to themselves, the money, well, some say to themselves, the money is not worth giving up the opportunity to have that priest or former cardinal law on the stand testifying in my case, even if I lose?
You know, I can't speak for individual victims, but I would hope that of the 550 some odd victims, that there'll be a few that will say, you know what, I still want my day in court. And I would love to see that happen, because we have not had a civil trial here in Boston. I'd love to see what a jury thinks that the damages should be. And I would love to have somebody challenge the charitable immunity doctrine.
That could take years and years, however, and that, you know, if these people who are going through this agony and who have gone through the agony for the last 8 or 10 or 15 years are looking forward to another.
Well, that's a good point, but some are stronger than others.
Charitable immunity, for those who don't, basically there's a recent case that said, yes, this $25,000 cap on liability, $20,000 liability for nonprofits like the church might be imposed. Do you believe that Bishop O'Malley, for those people who refuse to sign on to the settlement, would try to impose that $20,000 cap on payments to those people?
If they take it to trial, I think he has no choice, because the court is going to be, as they were in the cases that were just recently decided, even after the jury came back with over $1 million, the judge reduced the award to $20,000 and the Supreme Judicial Court upheld that. So I don't think it's Bishop O'Malley's choice, I think it's the victim's choice.
Speaking of the bishop, you heard what Ann had to say about Bishop O'Malley's role in this. Do you share her feelings about his ability to do more than he actually did?
I think you can always do more. Listen, the thing is the victims are going to have to decide amongst themselves, between themselves and their lawyers, what's fair, what's appropriate. Yeah, the bishop could sell, close down 50% of the diocese, sell half of the property. But is that really going to make that much of a difference for each of those individual victims? It's not just about the money. One of the things that I was really pleased to hear is the fact that there is a provision for therapy that goes above and beyond the settlement amount. We're talking about
lifetime provision.
Yeah, we're talking about healing here. People getting past this on an emotional level, and that's why, regardless of what the amount is, regardless of what the check is that they've they're going to get, they're still going to have the opportunity for therapy.
But I'm sorry.
And how does an arbitrator decide the extent of injury? I mean, how do you do that?
I suppose you use precedent and you look at what's happened. I don't know. It's pretty incalculable. I just want to say one point about the therapy that Phil mentioned. It would be great. That is a wonderful aspect of the settlement, and it would be really great if victims did not have to go to the Archdiocese for an interview before they get their therapy. That can be an option for some, but it'd be great if the others had an option of going to an outside professional to have that entry interview and then get the therapy paid, but still paid for by the church.
Phil, you raised the expression that we raised with Jeff Newman that we've heard throughout this last year and a half, that it's not about the money. But as Jeff Newman acknowledged, the agreement does not admit liability on the part of the church, does not admit guilt. So when Gary Bergeron so eloquently today held up the agreement and said, I'm no longer an alleged victim, I'm a survivor, that's technically not true. They are still alleged, and wasn't that one of the things that was so important for a settlement to be reached?
I can't speak on behalf of Gary. Listen, I think that whether you're legally a survivor or not, you know whether you're a survivor, and I don't think that a lot of victims are going to need to have it printed in a document for them to feel that way.
Phil, what about that, Phil Moran? The agreement does not constitute an admission of liability, but rather is a good faith resolution of disputed claims.
Well, I think Jeff Newman pointed out a very real problem, or a real reason for putting that in, was the fact if someone does opt out of the agreement and they had put in that there was liability, then they could use that in court when that other person goes. So this I think is very important, but I think as Gary Bergeron said, it doesn't apply to him. It would only apply to people who don't opt out, because he actually believes that he is no longer an alleged victim, but as he said, a survivor. And I think I would just have to strongly disagree with Ian. I don't think Archbishop O'Malley is a shrewd negotiator. I think if he were, he would have committed $75 million and said that's it. And I think they would have taken it. I think he went overboard. I think he came in at least $10 million more than anybody expected, and I think he's done a great job, and I think he should be commended. But again, remember, every Catholic in the Archdiocese of Boston is really a victim here, because that money is coming from all the Catholics in the Archdiocese of Boston. Unlike any other, it's not coming from the priests who committed these terrible, dastardly acts. It's coming from Barrett Doyle, and it's coming from Phil Moran, and it's coming from every other practicing Catholic in the Archdiocese of Boston.
There's also a provision in this agreement that we really haven't talked about, and that is that the church is going to offer ecumenical counseling for those who want to get back to the church, not necessarily the Catholic Church, but who want to get back to God, as one of the attorneys put it at this. What does this agreement mean? What will it mean to Catholics?
Not victims.
To Catholics.
Not victims.
Well, I don't think it's the generous, loving gesture that, I know it's not what I was looking for, and I appreciate what Phil's saying, but I really object to being called a victim because I have to pay for this. Do you know, there's a lot of property the church could sell to pay for this, a lot of vacant property. They wouldn't have to close our churches, they wouldn't have to close our schools. So I think if Catholics look at this closely, they're not going to see this as an extraordinarily healing settlement. The deal is closed.
But you're basically then writing off, to a great degree, the future of the Catholic Church for a lot of your fellow Catholics, because there isn't going to be another deal. This is assuming that 80% of the people buy in. This is it. So is that the statement you're making, that this is inadequate? And it's essentially the opportunity for healing is over? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I can only speak for myself.
Understood.
I feel that way, and I think you know, a lot of Catholics like me are in a sort of perpetual state of agony because we have not seen our leaders act like Christ would act.
You were about to jump in on 3 or 4 occasions there.
Is that we haven't heard what the percentage of the settlement is going to be picked up by the insurance companies, for example. It could be a substantial amount, in which case you know, it may not affect the Archdiocese as much as my colleague here fears.
Now,
they're going to have to sue the insurance companies, apparently, to get whatever money they're expecting.
Is your best guess that we're going to hear from Bishop O'Malley in the next 24 to 48 hours with a pretty powerful statement to follow up on this? Is that not what we should expect?
No, he's down in Washington.
Well, I understand that.
But I think when
there's a plane ride back, too.
Well, he's not coming back till Thursday, so I don't think in the next 24 hours you'll hear from him. I don't know when you'll hear from him, but he may have said what he had to say on Sunday night, and he spent 7 hours with the lawyers, and and he made his deal, and that may be it.
But could such a statement from him change the view you have tonight at 8 o'clock?
Oh, words don't matter anymore. We just have to see really generous actions.
Well, it was Bishop Gregory, who was at that conference in Washington with Archbishop O'Malley, said that, referring to the Boston settlement, that it represents 20 months of intense soul searching in the Boston Archdiocese among the leaders and the clergy.
Well, I think it has been 20 months of terrible soul searching for all of us, for not only the leaders of the Catholic Church, but for the laity and for all of the priests in the Archdiocese, those wonderful priests who have never been accused of anything. We saw 900 of them turn out at the cathedral for the Archbishop's installation. That had to be one of the most moving moments during this whole 20-month
Phil,
period.
you mentioned the wonderful priests several times. Doesn't it bother you some that the less than wonderful priests, the horrible priests, the perpetrators, in most cases will never stand trial in a criminal proceeding, will never be the defendant or a witness in a civil proceeding if the vast majority of these are settled? Doesn't that trouble you as a lifelong Catholic?
Well, it does to a degree, but that's the way the law is, and you know, you can't change the law. Bad law, you know, tough cases make bad law. You don't change the law because of something that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago.
That also illustrates that this is not the end of the story. There's still lots of work to be done, not only healing for the victims, but also getting some of these laws brought up to date so that this situation never happens again.
All right, our thanks to Phil Moran, to Barrett Doyle, and to Phil Saviano.